A financial time bomb is ticking across Asia, and no one is ready. From the Himalayan peaks to the tropical islands, entire economies are hanging by a thread. As war, debt, and disaster converge, the next great economic collapse might not begin in Wall Street or London, but in Asia's most vulnerable corners. According to the IMF and World Bank, over a dozen countries in the region are facing debt levels above 80% of GDP, collapsing foreign reserves, and inflationary spikes that are pricing millions out of food and fuel. In this video, we break down the 10 Asian nations most at risk of economic ruin by 2026. And trust us, some of these may shock you. Number 10. North Korea. North Korea's economy is already on life support, but what's coming next could make the 1990s famine look modest. Decades of sanctions, isolation, and mismanagement have left the country reliant on black market trade and sporadic aid from China. According to The Diplomat, even state-run factories have halted operations due to power shortages and material scarcity. The regime's extreme secrecy hides much, but signs of distress are leaking out. Satellite imagery shows empty railways and silent industrial zones. Grain shortages have gotten so severe that some border provinces are reportedly rationing food to the military, Pyongyang's top priority. Analysts estimate that North Korea's GDP has contracted for 3 straight years, and trade with China, its lifeline, has fallen by nearly 80% since pre-pandemic levels. Add to that soaring food prices, collapsing public health infrastructure, and near-zero foreign investment, and you have the makings of a slow-motion collapse. Most alarmingly, the government's response has been more control, not reform. Border crackdowns, tighter surveillance, and restrictions on private markets are choking what little economic vitality remains. If current trends continue, North Korea could enter a full-blown humanitarian catastrophe by 2026. Number 9. Maldives. The Maldives may be a tourist paradise, but behind the beach resorts lies a debt-fueled crisis spiraling out of control. The tiny island nation owes more than 30% of its GDP to Chinese infrastructure loans, debt it has little ability to repay. According to the Economic Times, repayment deadlines are looming, and sovereign default is no longer a distant threat. Tourism, the country's economic backbone, is now highly vulnerable to external shocks, especially with rising geopolitical tensions and climate-related disruptions. Foreign currency reserves have dwindled to less than 3 months of imports, leaving the central bank with few options. The government has delayed infrastructure payments and begun quietly seeking debt restructuring help from international institutions. But China's tight lending conditions make this process fraught with risk. Experts warn that any delay in tourism recovery could trigger capital flight and currency collapse. Adding to the pressure is a bloated public sector and heavy reliance on imports. With food and energy costs climbing, even a modest oil shock could send inflation into double digits. The financial stability of the Maldives is hanging by a thread. By 2026, unless drastic reforms are made, the country could face economic paralysis, with debt traps, inflation, and foreign dependency converging all at once. Before we move on to the next country, take a moment to subscribe. Your support empowers us to investigate the stories others won't touch and deliver thought-provoking content directly to you. The more you support, the further our reach. Number 8. Nepal. Nepal's economy is being squeezed from every direction: shrinking remittances, rising inflation, and growing unrest. According to the Kathmandu Post, remittance inflows, one of Nepal's key economic lifelines, have begun to slow dramatically in 2025, just as the country faces a mounting cost of living crisis. The World Bank has flagged Nepal's economy as particularly vulnerable due to its reliance on labor migration and foreign aid. Now, conflict in the Middle East and tighter global labor laws are threatening to choke off the remittance stream, which makes up nearly a quarter of GDP. Inflation has surged past 8%, driven by high food prices and supply chain disruptions. Meanwhile, the country's import-dependent economy is running a ballooning trade deficit. The central bank has already begun rationing foreign exchange for fuel and essential goods. Political instability is only making things worse. Protests against the government's economic mismanagement have grown more frequent, and foreign investors are fleeing in search of safer markets. Domestic banks are reporting rising non-performing loans and stagnant credit growth. If these trends persist, Nepal could face a cascading collapse, starting with balance of payments pressure, followed by inflationary spirals and widespread unemployment. By 2026, Nepal could become another cautionary tale of regional fragility. Number 7. Bangladesh. Bangladesh is often hailed as a South Asian success story, but right now it's walking a razor's edge. The country faces a mounting dollar crisis that's threatening to undo decades of progress. According to the IMF, Bangladesh has qualified for an $884 million tranche in June 2025. But that's just a temporary lifeline for a nation grappling with inflation, energy shortages, and a collapsing currency. The country's foreign reserves have plunged to barely $20 billion, down over 40% from their 2021 peak. Import restrictions have led to food and medicine shortages, while power blackouts are becoming more common. And the garment industry, which accounts for 85% of export earnings, is suffering from reduced global demand and high production costs. Political instability adds another layer of risk. Elections loom in 2026, and opposition groups are already warning of street protests if inflation isn't brought under control. The government's ability to contain unrest while securing external financing will determine whether the economy stabilizes or spirals out of control. The World Bank has downgraded Bangladesh's growth forecast for 2025 to just 4.2%, far below the 6% needed to stay afloat. If reforms stall or external shocks mount, Bangladesh could slip from resilience into full-blown crisis territory. Number 6. Afghanistan. Afghanistan's economy is a humanitarian disaster hidden in plain sight. Since the Taliban takeover in 2021, the country has been operating under international sanctions and near-total aid dependency. And now, with global attention elsewhere, millions are slipping into starvation. According to the World Food Program, more than half of Afghans, nearly 24 million people, need urgent humanitarian assistance. Cuts to aid have left entire provinces without basic food rations. The World Bank reports GDP has shrunk by nearly 35% since 2021, with unemployment soaring past 40%. Afghanistan's banking sector is frozen, foreign investment is non-existent, and the informal economy barely sustains local communities. Sanctions prevent international organizations from transferring funds to hospitals and schools, creating a vacuum in basic services. The Taliban's internal policies, like banning women from working, only deepen the crisis. The absence of a functional government recognized by the global community makes economic revival nearly impossible. As Afghanistan faces another brutal winter, the question isn't whether its economy will collapse, it's how many lives will be lost when it does. Number 5. Myanmar. Myanmar's economy is in freefall, and the numbers are brutal. According to the World Bank, GDP has shrunk by more than 13% since the 2021 coup, and recent earthquakes in 2025 have made things far worse. In June, the bank reported that the natural disasters further eroded agricultural output and deepened an already dire humanitarian crisis. The junta's refusal to allow international aid has amplified suffering. Inflation is spiraling, jobs are vanishing, and basic services are collapsing. Many businesses have shut down, while foreign investment has nearly evaporated. The black market now fuels most of the economy. Everything from fuel to food is being traded off the books, creating massive inefficiencies and dangerous social imbalances. The lack of regulation has invited criminal networks to take hold. The World Bank warns that any further conflict escalation could lead to prolonged economic stagnation. And given the fractured state of governance, recovery remains a distant dream. Number 4. Pakistan. Pakistan's economy is standing on a knife's edge. In June 2025, the IMF released a dire warning. Pakistan's external financing gap has ballooned beyond projections, and debt repayments are now eating up over 50% of government revenues. Meanwhile, inflation remains high, and the rupee continues to struggle against the US dollar. Fuel subsidies are bleeding the national budget dry. With global oil prices surging past $90 a barrel, Islamabad's energy import bill has spiraled out of control. Blackouts are becoming more frequent, and domestic industries are being forced to shut down or relocate due to energy shortages. Despite securing another IMF tranche in May, Pakistan's outlook remains grim. Political instability, exacerbated by arrests of opposition leaders and street protests, has shaken investor confidence. As foreign direct investment dries up, so does any hope of sustained growth. The informal economy has ballooned, but it can't plug the widening fiscal hole. Joblessness is spiking, especially among young people, many of whom are turning to migration or illicit work to survive. In short, Pakistan's social contract is fraying at the seams. Experts say that without a dramatic reset, fiscal reform, political reconciliation, and energy independence, Pakistan may face default. It is no longer a question of if, but when. Number 3. Laos. Laos may not often make global headlines, but behind the scenes, its economy is teetering dangerously close to collapse. The country's ballooning debt, much of it owed to China, has left it in a chokehold of repayment deadlines and shrinking fiscal space. According to the Lowy Institute, Laos is among the most heavily indebted countries to China in per capita terms, with over $12 billion owed. The problem isn't just how much Laos owes, but how it borrowed. Massive infrastructure projects, especially railways and energy plants, were built on Chinese loans under opaque terms. These projects have struggled to generate the revenue needed for repayment, leaving Laos exposed to what experts now call a classic debt trap scenario. As inflation rises and the local currency tumbles, ordinary Laotians are paying the price. Food prices have surged by over 20% year-on-year, while basic medicine shortages persist in rural areas. Meanwhile, international financial institutions have sounded the alarm about the country's dwindling foreign reserves. The government's ability to respond is severely limited. With Beijing holding most of the financial cards, Laos faces a future where policy autonomy is eroded. If global shocks continue into 2026, Laos could face not just a fiscal collapse, but a total economic seizure. Number 2. Lebanon. Lebanon's economic unraveling is already one of the worst globally, and by 2026, things could deteriorate even further. The currency has lost over 90% of its value since 2019, and public infrastructure is collapsing under the weight of corruption, mismanagement, and geopolitical instability. With no formal president for over a year and limited parliamentary functionality, the country is virtually paralyzed. The World Bank has classified Lebanon's economic crisis as one of the most severe globally since the 1850s. Banking failures, electricity blackouts, and triple-digit inflation have decimated the middle class and driven up poverty levels. The World Food Program reports that over 40% of Lebanese households are now food insecure. Foreign aid remains a lifeline, but donor fatigue is setting in. Even the IMF has grown cautious, linking assistance to political reforms that remain gridlocked in Beirut. In a region racked by conflict, Lebanon's internal dysfunction is pushing it closer to total collapse. Remittances, which used to prop up the economy, are drying up as Lebanese expats face economic hardship abroad. Meanwhile, emigration is draining the country of young professionals, doctors, and engineers, exacerbating the brain drain. By 2026, without radical reform and international stabilization, Lebanon risks becoming a fully failed state. Its collapse wouldn't just shake the Middle East, it would reverberate through global refugee systems and aid networks. Number 1. Sri Lanka. At the top of the list is Sri Lanka, a country that's already walked to the edge of economic ruin and may not survive the next stumble. After defaulting on its foreign debt in 2022, Sri Lanka has struggled to regain control. In March 2025, it clinched a $2.5 billion debt restructuring deal with Japan, offering a lifeline. But the IMF warns there's no room for policy errors. Inflation, political unrest, and a growing cost of living crisis have drained the patience of everyday Sri Lankans. More than a quarter of the population remains food insecure, and tourism, once a cornerstone of the economy, has yet to fully recover. Power cuts and fuel rationing still haunt parts of the country. For many, survival, not growth, is the goal. June 2025 IMF reports suggest Sri Lanka's path to recovery is on a razor's edge. The country's reliance on imports and dwindling reserves mean any oil shock or commodity spike could push it over again. Despite structural reforms, the foundation remains fragile. One policy slip, and Sri Lanka could find itself back at square one or worse. As regional instability grows and global inflation surges, investors remain skittish. The rupee's value continues to fluctuate wildly, complicating trade and external payments. Without consistent, disciplined leadership, this hard-won progress may evaporate by 2026. From the bustling cities of Dhaka to the mountainous provinces of Nepal, Asia's economic map is littered with fault lines. War, debt, climate disasters, and currency crises are converging, and the countdown to collapse may already be underway for some nations. These 10 countries aren't just struggling, they're at the mercy of forces far beyond their borders. So what happens next? Will global institutions step in with enough urgency, or will internal missteps push these fragile economies over the edge? If you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more hard-hitting global insights. Let us know in the comments. Which country do you think is most at risk and why?